Hello, everyone, and welcome back. You're listening to Daily C1 English Vocabulary. My name is Emma.
And my name is Tom. Today we have 12 words and expressions. By the end of this episode, your English will feel more precise, more nuanced, and more natural. Let's get started.
Slump. Let's start with a very practical word, slump. As a noun, a slump is a period of poor performance, falling numbers, or low energy.
The housing market is in a slump. The tech sector is currently in a major slump after years of rapid growth. I've been in a creative slump for weeks. Nothing I write feels good. That last meaning is especially useful in everyday conversation. It describes that flat, unmotivated period that happens to almost everyone.
As a verb, to slump means to fall or sink heavily, usually because of exhaustion. He slumped into the chair after a 12-hour shift. Or figuratively, the company's sales slumped by 30% in the third quarter. It's a neutral word and works in both formal and informal contexts.
Compared to decline, slump feels more sudden and noticeable. A decline can be slow and gradual over time. A slump is more like a clear dip, a drop that you can actually see or feel. A dip is usually small and temporary. It's often just a normal fluctuation, something that goes down and then recovers. A slump, on the other hand, is deeper and longer lasting. It's more than a dip. It points to a more serious problem that doesn't fix itself quickly. Compared to drop, slump also implies a longer period, not just a one-time fall. A drop describes the moment something falls. A slump describes the period that follows. For example, a drop in sales could be one bad week. A dip in sales might be a short-term fluctuation. But a slump in sales means the problem is sustained and significant, something the company actually needs to address.
Semblance. After a slump, you often try to restore some semblance of normality. Imagine a manager who's panicking inside, but looks completely calm in front of the team. That calm on the outside, that's a semblance of calm. It looks like the real thing, but it may not be. You'll almost always see it in the phrase, a semblance of something.
After the crisis, the company managed to restore a semblance of stability, but uncertainty remained. He tried to maintain a semblance of calm during the interview, despite feeling terrified inside. The ceasefire brought some semblance of peace to the region. The key idea is that the appearance is there, but it may not go very deep. You're not saying something is fully present. You're saying there's at least a surface version of it.
It's a formal, rather literary word. You'll encounter it in written English, journalism, and speeches, but rarely in everyday conversation. You'll often see semblance in fixed phrases like a semblance of order, a semblance of control, a semblance of normality.
In casual speech, people would simply say some sense of order or some kind of calm instead. Compared to appearance, semblance is more specific. It implies the real thing might be missing. Compared to trace or hint, semblance focuses on how things look from the outside rather than how much is actually there.
Loom. While you're trying to keep up a semblance of order, you might feel a problem looming. To loom means to appear as a large, often frightening shape, or an unpleasant event that is about to happen soon.
A dark mountain loomed in the distance. Storm clouds loomed on the horizon. Figuratively, the deadline for the merger is looming and we still haven't finished the paperwork. Unlike approach or happen, loom carries a sense of pressure or threat. If a deadline is approaching, it's just coming. If it's looming, it's making you feel stressed.
There's also a useful expression, loom large. This means something feels very important or dominant. For many people, financial uncertainty loomed large. Here, it doesn't mean approaching, but rather taking up a lot of mental space. The question of funding loomed large in every discussion. That phrase means something is very prominent and impossible to ignore.
In terms of tone, loom is neutral, but it's often used in negative contexts: stress, pressure, uncertainty. You usually don't say, "Success is looming." So, a simple way to remember it: literal, something appears large and a bit threatening. Figurative, something is getting closer and creating pressure. And that's why this word is so effective. It doesn't just describe what's happening, it describes how it feels.
Grind. Our next word is one you'll hear constantly in everyday English: grind. Originally, to grind has a literal meaning. It means to crush something into small pieces, usually with repeated force. For example, he was grinding coffee beans in the kitchen. The machine grinds the grains into flour. So the core idea is repetitive effort over time.
And that's exactly what carries into the figurative meaning. In everyday English, to grind means to work hard for a long time, especially on something repetitive, tiring, or not very exciting. For example, she spent months grinding through exam preparation. He's been grinding at work with no real break. They had to grind through a long and exhausting project. This is very common in work, studying, long-term goals.
Now let's look at the noun form. You'll often hear the daily grind. This means your routine work, especially when it feels repetitive or draining. For him, the daily grind was starting to feel overwhelming. She wanted a break from the daily grind.
This expression is slightly informal, but very natural. Compared to work hard, grind focuses less on effort in general and more on duration and repetition. You're not just working hard, you're doing the same thing again and again over time. Compared to struggle, grind is more neutral. You might not be failing, it's just exhausting and continuous. Compared to push through, grind is less about one difficult moment and more about a long process. There's also a very common structure: grind through something. This emphasizes getting through something long or difficult step by step. She had to grind through hundreds of applications. In terms of tone, grind is informal to neutral. It's very common in spoken English and also appears in professional contexts, especially in a more conversational tone. And that's why this word is so useful. It captures not just hard work, but the feeling of ongoing effort without quick results.
Waver. The grind can test anyone's resolve, and when pressure builds, people sometimes begin to waver. Originally, to waver has a literal meaning. It describes something that moves slightly from side to side or becomes unsteady.
For example, the flame wavered in the wind. His voice wavered as he spoke. So the core idea is instability, not steady, not fixed.
And this leads us to the figurative meaning. To waver means to become uncertain, to hesitate, or to start losing confidence. For example, her confidence began to waver after several rejections. He never wavered in his decision. She wavered for a moment before answering. She had been so certain about her decision, but now she was starting to waver. He never wavered in his support for the project, even when the budget was cut.
It works in both formal and informal contexts. It's particularly useful for describing internal conflict, when someone is torn between two choices and their certainty is slipping. Compared to hesitate, waver suggests something more ongoing. Hesitation is a pause before acting. Wavering is a sustained state of uncertainty that goes back and forth. And compared to doubt, waver adds movement. You're not just doubting, you're visibly swinging between positions. You'll also see it in contexts where someone is trying to stay strong. Despite everything, she refused to waver from her principles.
Weary. When pressure builds over a long time, tired just isn't enough to describe it. That's when you need weary. Weary means feeling very tired after a long period of effort, especially when that effort has been repetitive or draining.
For example, the travelers were weary after a long journey. He looked weary after weeks of overtime. So the key idea is worn down over time.
Now, very often, This word is used beyond physical tiredness to describe mental or emotional fatigue. For example, she grew weary of constant criticism. He's weary of dealing with the same problems every day. A very common structure is weary of something. When you say you're weary of something, it means you're thoroughly tired of it, fed up, exhausted by it. I'm weary of repeating the same explanation.
Compared to tired, weary is deeper and more long-term. Compared to exhausted, it's less intense, but more about duration. Compared to drained, weary builds up more gradually. Drained means your energy is gone, often after something intense. Weary develops slowly over time.
Adverse. Weariness often sets in when you're facing adverse conditions. Our next word. Adverse is an adjective meaning unfavorable, harmful, or working against you. It describes conditions, circumstances, or effects that make things harder or cause damage.
The expedition was called off due to adverse weather conditions. The new regulation had an adverse effect on small businesses. Despite adverse circumstances, the team delivered the project on time.
This is a formal word. You'll see it frequently in business reports, medical writing, news articles, and official documents. In casual conversation, people tend to use bad, harsh, or difficult instead. Common collocations: adverse conditions, adverse effects, adverse circumstances, adverse reaction. In medicine, an adverse reaction means a harmful side effect. In law, an adverse ruling goes against you.
Compared to negative, adverse is more formal and more active. It implies something is working against you, not just that it's bad. Compared to unfavorable, adverse carries a slightly stronger sense of actual harm or damage.
Tenacious. To keep going through adverse conditions, you need to be tenacious. Tenacious is an adjective that means holding on very firmly to a goal, a belief, an object, or a position, and refusing to let go. It describes determined, persistent effort that doesn't break under pressure. She was a tenacious negotiator. She never gave up a single point without a fight. The investigator spent years on the case, tenacious in his pursuit of the truth. Tenacious plants can survive in the harshest environments, clinging to rock faces where nothing else grows. He was tenacious in his job search, rejected dozens of times. But he kept going. It can be used literally, things that physically grip. But the figurative use is much more common and powerful.
The noun is tenacity. It was her tenacity that got her through law school while working full-time. This is a formal word, and it almost always carries positive connotations. Being tenacious is admirable. Compared to persistent, tenacious is stronger. It implies a tighter grip, a deeper resistance to giving up. Compared to stubborn, tenacious usually describes a positive quality. You're holding on because the goal matters, not just because you refuse to change.
Derivative. Our next word is derivative. As an adjective, derivative describes something that is not original. It's based on or copied from something that already exists without adding anything new. It's almost always used as a criticism. The film was entertaining, but the plot felt derivative. You could predict every twist. Critics dismissed his early work as derivative, too heavily influenced by his teachers.
In art, music, and writing, calling something derivative is a polite but firm way of saying it lacks originality. Compared to unoriginal, derivative sounds more analytical and less emotional. Compared to imitative, it's broader. Something imitative actively tries to copy a specific style, while something derivative may simply feel like it's been done before. It's a slightly formal word, more common in written reviews and criticism than in casual conversation.
Strikingly. Our adverb today is strikingly. It means in a way that is very noticeable, impressive, or surprising. It intensifies the adjective that follows it. She was strikingly confident for someone so young. The two brothers were strikingly different. One quiet and careful, the other loud and impulsive. The company has been strikingly successful despite the economic slump.
It's used to highlight contrast, beauty, or something that immediately stands out from its surroundings. The adjective form is striking, a striking resemblance, a striking choice, a striking silence. Strikingly works in both formal and informal contexts. Compared to remarkably or notably, strikingly is more visual and immediate. It suggests something that hits you, that you can't miss.
Lightbulb moment. Sometimes, after days of the grind, of wavering and weariness, clarity suddenly arrives. That's what we call a lightbulb moment. This idiom describes the instant when a sudden understanding or brilliant idea comes to you, often after a long period of confusion or effort. The image comes from old cartoons, where a light bulb appears above a character's head the moment they have a great idea. I'd been struggling with the problem for days, and then, light bulb moment, I realized the entire approach was wrong. She had a light bulb moment in the middle of the night and grabbed her notebook. The workshop was useful, but the real light bulb moment came during the coffee break, talking with a stranger.
It's an informal expression used in everyday conversation, interviews, and storytelling. You won't find it in formal reports, but it's perfect for podcasts, presentations, and casual speech. Compared to breakthrough, a light bulb moment is more personal and sudden. It's a mental click, a flash of insight. A breakthrough can be collective, gradual, and planned. A light bulb moment feels individual and instant.
Against all odds. And our final expression today is against all odds. This phrase means despite very difficult circumstances or a very low probability of success. When someone achieves something against all odds, they succeed when almost everything was working against them. Against all odds, the small startup outcompeted 3 industry giants and won the contract. She passed the bar exam on her 3rd attempt, against all odds, while caring for 2 children alone. The patient made a full recovery against all odds. The doctors were astonished.
This expression is perfect for stories of perseverance, resilience, and unexpected success. It's neutral in formality and works in news articles, speeches, motivational contexts, and everyday conversation alike. Compared to surprisingly or unexpectedly, against all odds adds a much stronger sense of the obstacles involved. It doesn't just mean the result was unexpected, it means the result seemed nearly impossible given everything that stood in the way.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Let's take a quick look at everything we covered. We started with slump, that heavy drop in performance or motivation. We moved to semblance, the outward appearance of something, even when the reality is thin. Loom gave us the feeling of something large and threatening creeping closer. Grind captured the relentless effort of daily hard work. Waver described the moment when certainty starts to wobble. Weary brought the weight of deep, accumulated exhaustion. Adverse helped us name unfavorable conditions working against us. Tenacious gave us the word for holding on with everything you have. Derivative let us identify what lacks originality. Strikingly showed us how to highlight what stands out. A light bulb moment named that sudden flash of clarity. And against all odds gave us language for the most inspiring kind of success.
Thank you so much for listening today. Until next time, take care and keep learning.
And see you in the next episode.